Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm very honored to have Scotty Stiles, who's a pain elimination coach and mind-body practitioner. So thank you so much, Scotty, for being with me today.
Thank you for
I,
having me, Tanner.
of course, we were talking earlier. I like that in your name it says like elimination coach. I really like that it states exactly what we're going for.
That's right. People need to know that symptoms can be eliminated, really, and not just, a
Yeah,
little better. We can really get at them. Yeah.
yeah. And it's more rare that I talk to someone that's located in Canada because as we
Mm.
were talking earlier, in Canada, there's not too many like mind body coaches, therapists, doctors that are existing up north here.
Totally. It's almost like maybe we could create some sort of platform like, these are the people in Canada. And, yeah, when I
Yeah,
started my journey in 2017, I didn't know anybody talking about mind body medicine, really. So it's
yeah.
amazing to see you and all these people that are now talking about this. A lot can change in a short amount of time. Mm.
It really can, and we're catching up. We're catching up to the United States slowly here. Um,
Yeah.
so today, Scotty, I thought we'd start off by you sharing a bit of your healing journey that you've gone through. Um, and so give me context, like when did your chronic pain kind of start?
Hmm. So, when I was a teenager, I had I can recall having my first sort of sharp, acute moment of pain. And I wasn't doing anything. I was just chatting and hanging out. And in hindsight, hindsight's 2020. I know now that there was probably some psychological adjustment and going on in my psyche. I had finished doing, you know, a performance, a musical performance, and my brain and nervous system probably felt some sort of danger and or what's next kind of feeling. But anyway, at the time, I associated the pain with something structural, and I thought, well, I see other people in pain. I see my grandmother has struggled with pain, and this is the part of life, and maybe getting older, or we
Yeah,
just experience pain because the body, maybe it just needs to be stretched more, or maybe I slept the wrong way, and all of these things that the narrative of what we say in our society. And so that was kind of where my mind went, and like
yeah,
that idea of, oh, I'm probably just getting older. But when you think about it, I was only 18. What does
yeah,
that mean, right? And then as the years go on, more of these sort of acute flare-ups were happening, to the point where I was bedridden, not being able to walk for short amounts of time,
okay,
calling to work and all that. Into my 30s, the pain was just on 24. And I did what anybody would do. I would see my doctor, and get referred to a spine surgeon who said there's
yeah,
nothing really we can really do for you. Have all of the scans done, MRIs, X-rays, and all they could really offer were some injections of whatnot, and which didn't really help with the pain at all of the other things that everyone recommends, that so many people try, didn't work either, like seeing a chiropractor, physiotherapist, massage, osteopath, acupuncture, all of the things that I thought maybe would help myself, just pulling from thin air, like you know quitting alcohol, cigarettes, cutting out sugar, any sort of any
sort
inflammatory food or anything. And none of that really worked either. I just became a beacon of health, because I thought, if my body is at its the pain should go away, but it wasn't working. Yeah.
okay. And
Mm.
so primarily, and that's a lot that you went through. Primarily, was it back pain that you were having
Good
as you
question.
went
Yeah.
through?
Yeah, for the most part, it was back pain and hip pain, to the point where it's not just mildly uncomfortable. It was to the point where I wasn't able to sit in a chair or on the couch. I was lying on the floor, always sort of massaging that area. The pain would move around. I also, didn't make the association at the time, but I also had shoulder pain that was coming and going. And then I had other mystery symptoms like heart palpitations, or this sort of fear of being overheated. If there was a heat wave in Toronto, I would get a lot of panic disorder or anxiety and things like that too. And I didn't really know at the time the link between all of those things. I just, in
Yeah.
retrospect, it all makes sense that anxiety and chronic pain are linked, but it was all just such a mystery. So I did go down the road of seeing a therapist, a CBT therapist, but they didn't make that connection that the pain was a danger signal coming from the
Okay.
brain and nervous system. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were even receiving therapy and you were receiving all the physical treatments. And you're right. And you probably see this a lot too, but I see this a lot in the people that I work with where they are seeing, a variety of practitioners. Some
Mhm.
focus psychologically, but there's like a disconnect between the two that's going
Yes.
on. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is why mind body therapy is so important, mind body informed, to make that
Yeah.
connection. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so at the time, it sounds like you had so many symptoms, and it sounds like like it is for a lot of people, it almost spread over time. Hey, where there was
Mhm.
just more symptoms kind of piling up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the more these modalities, these physical modalities didn't work, the more fear there was, which created more of the symptom. An example would be having sort of like a cortisone injection, and then just the trauma of that, having that happen, and then, getting home and expecting to feel better, and really, thinking to myself, if this doesn't make me better, I don't know what else will. That fear actually amplified the pain even more. So effectively, the cortisone injection did nothing. And
Yeah.
so now that I know the mind body connection and addressing fear, when we lower the fear, this is how we lower the pain signal. And, I really wish this was acknowledged to me at the time, but nobody was talking about it. Nobody in Canada certainly was talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so common, right? Like it's like this hope disappointment cycle that starts to
Mhm.
happen with treatment after treatment where you start to get hopeful. And I remember this, like I would start to get hopeful because I'm seeing a new person or they're saying like, hey, they did find something and this is what we need to do physically. And you get hopeful, you get
Yeah.
excited, and then as it starts to not working, then the fear and despair just kicks in, right?
Uh, you're right. Yeah. And so, because people will find relief, people will, I did like a sports medicine exercise plan, and I got better for maybe a few weeks to a couple months and whatnot. So I thought it was working, but then the pain came back. So then I went back to this sports medicine place, and that same approach wasn't working anymore. And so now we know with the mind body connection that we can work with placebo in a good way.
Yeah.
We want placebo, but that
Yeah.
type of placebo, it's not like a real, placebo from like a physical modality. It's not addressing what is actually going on. It's just a temporary placebo. Whereas we want to be our own placebo, and realize that education and knowledge around this, the psychoeducation, is effectively healing when we understand the mechanism behind the nervous system. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he hit on such an important piece there. Is beautifully said because there is that placebo effect, and when it's around physical treatments, then we think it reinforces there must be something wrong because we got this thing, I got
Mm.
relief, and now it's just back. So we just keep cycling through in this
Yeah.
way. Um,
Yeah, and it's no wonder people, their healing journey takes so long to reach this point, because they're kind of stuck in that loop of physical modalities. So they're trying all of these practitioners for years because they're getting a little bit of relief, and then it comes back, and they just think that's normal, right? They just think like, oh well, I have to see this practitioner for the rest of my life in order to get better, to feel like my best self. Like, I got my monthly PT. That's just part of life. But
yeah,
people don't realize that this does not need to be your life. There are ways to never need those things ever again.
yeah, yeah. And so give me an idea, Scotty, like how long were you kind of in this, treatment after physical treatment process? Like how many years did that kind of spread for you?
Mm. Yeah, I would say maybe up to 10 years.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
it's a
So it was a
long,
long time.
yeah, of
Yeah.
just not finding any answers and the pain just sort of increasing. Mhm.
Yeah. And so as that was taking place, like where was I'm curious, like when was the moment when you started to hear about a mind body approach,
Mm.
or that maybe pain was the more the result of a brain and nervous system? Like when was that door starting to open? Do you remember those first moments?
Oh, of course I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's 2 moments because the first moment, I accepted it, but then I rejected it. So the first time that happened was in 2015. I heard about Dr. John Sarno.
Yeah.
And so Googling things is usually not wise when we're Googling our
Yeah.
symptoms and trying to figure out what's wrong and looking at all these diagnoses.
Yeah.
But I found Dr. John Sarno, whose theory of TMS, tension myositis syndrome, that this pain in the nervous system is coming from psychological dangers and emotional threats. And it's not a structural issue. And these structural abnormalities in the body are normal abnormalities that we all have. It's like gray hair. Gray hair does not hurt. So I heard that. I thought, this is great. Okay, I have a solution. But then I
Yeah.
also had my MRI that said I had all these things. And I kind of got lost in the plot a little bit. I had some pushback from friends who said, oh, so the pain's just in your head? Oh, so you're just imagining it? And I thought, oh, I don't like that. No, I want to be validated. This isn't fair, you know? And
Yeah.
so I started to cling more to the diagnosis and to something being structurally wrong. And it's almost like I had amnesia and completely forgot about Dr. Sarno. And I thought, okay, well, that's great and everything, but can that truly work? And the doubt crept in. And so I kept going down that road of trying to fix myself from a structural lens. And then at the end of 2017, again, I had tried everything. And and it was a miracle. I was at a used bookstore here in Toronto, and I saw the Mind Body Prescription, Dr. Sarno,
Yeah.
and I took the book and I brought it home and I said, I'm giving up everything else. I have nothing else to lose.
Yeah.
You know, true change can come out of desperation. And
Yeah.
then, I applied all of the skills. I took his advice really that we need to not reinforce that this is a body problem. I stopped seeing the osteopath. I stopped doing all of the physical exercises that I thought would help, and started soaking up the material. So, yeah, it was around that time that I really realized that this is the solution, and that opened the door to obviously all of the other things that followed.
Yeah. And it's such a common occurrence what you're explaining, because you had this glimmering moment where, you started to buy in. You were like, "Hey, maybe this is what's going on," back in 2015. And then the door got
Yeah.
closed really quick. And
Oh
that
yeah.
makes sense. Like, I think even for myself, when I think back, there were moments where I was like pretty sure, like, this is a mind body issue. Like, this is a brain and nervous system issue. Nothing physically has helped me this far. But then that door would close really quick. And I think a big resistance, as you said, there is, we start to worry, is this all in our head? Is this all in my head? And you're right. Like when we feel invalidated, like that's a very invalidating thing to say to ourselves, to hear from others, which we know, you and I, that that's not the case, that the pain, whether it's being generated due to a survival response or whether it's being generated because of some damage, the brain really doesn't know the difference. It's experiencing it in the same way.
Yeah.
But that statement, I feel like is such a blocker for people, that maybe this is all in my head and I'm making this up.
Yeah, and luckily there are people that talk about this in this way that troubleshoot that idea. of the pain being in their head. And it's not in your head, it's just coming from the brain. The brain controls everything that we're experiencing. If you didn't have your
Yeah.
brain, you wouldn't have any sensations. So how the work evolves is so important, because just reading a Dr. Sarno book wasn't really enough. He kind of leaves people guessing, like, okay, well, now what do I do? He says, think psychologically, and he's got his 12 daily reminders, but there isn't much of a treatment plan when you think about it. And
Yeah.
so the way we talk about it now, with the pain neuroscience education and everything, it's evolved so much, that we can really explain, and validate, like you said, like how this is important, how this works for people. Mhm.
Yeah. And so on that note, like in 2017, it sounded like you really dived into the work
Right.
and starting with Dr. Sarno's book. But for yourself, let's ask this first. Like how long did the healing kind of take for you where like you were seeing significant reductions? Like how long of
Mhm.
a time was that journey for you from 2017 on?
Yeah. Everyone wants to know, how long is it going to take, right?
I know it's a common question.
Very, normal question, and everyone wants to know. And you know, when we can talk about this, we understand, like, we don't always want to be comparing ourselves to others, but
Yeah.
it's okay to know that it can happen very quickly. And also, it's important to know that this is a lifelong journey. So, but basically, in a nutshell, I can say that I had my healing moments almost instantly, right? So I'm reading Dr. Sarno's book, and this feeling of safety in my subconscious mind had just come over me with such a great deal, that the pain completely vanished. I had no hip pain, no back pain for probably a few days, but then interestingly enough, the pain would come back, or I would have
Yeah.
a symptom comparative. As soon as the pain went away, all of a sudden I had severely dry eyes. Like, what is that, right? Well, as we know
Yeah.
with the symptom imperative, the brain and nervous system will continue to create a symptom if you're not addressing sort of what is going on emotionally and psychologically. If your brain and nervous system still feel like there's some sort of danger, the body is going to tell you. And so, yeah, there was healing instantly, and then there was more work to do. And then, I did the work of Dr. Howard Schubiner, and I fell into the hands of Nicole Sachs, who was
Yeah.
she was a pivotal moment for me, getting into expressive writing and what she calls journal speak. And so that was a huge epiphany and an awakening for me, because it did deal with more of the Dr. Sarno approach of understanding repressed emotions, and actually having a tool to
Yeah.
really do an emotional exorcism and get that out. And so I was diligent about that, and I did it every day, just like she says, do it every day. We got to believe, do the work, and practice patience and kindness for ourselves. And so I did it. Again, nothing to lose. And so that was about the 5 month mark. And then I had months of feeling pain free. And then, of course, the journey evolves and evolves, and new things come up. I had foot pain, I had wrist pain, I had
Yeah.
uh, all sorts of things. And then, new tools would arise that I needed to discover. There were other things that weren't just about journaling repressed emotions that I really needed to investigate. And it's funny, because I'm still coming up with these things of, oh my goodness, like that's something that I can work on too. That's another
Yeah.
thing in my life that I'm maybe not feeling safe around, or that's another reason why this symptom is coming on, that can point me into a direction of what I need to do in my life, and guide me. So it's very profound.
It is. And I really like the way you kind of explained that, Scotty, because you're right. The common question that any mind body practitioner is going to get is like, how long is it going to take? I want to know exactly how long. And that's an impossible question to answer
Right.
because, some people heal really quick, some people take much longer. And as you said for yourself, there's the healing work continues on. For myself, I haven't had chronic symptoms, chronic pain in years. Every once in a
Yeah.
while, a symptom pops up and it
Yeah.
doesn't become chronic. Like a lot of times it's 20 minutes. It's not super long,
Yeah.
but that took time to get there. And it also is telling you like, it's these meaningful messages that your brain and nervous system is letting you know like, hey, there's something you need to continue working on. And it sounds
Yeah.
like you did a lot of that where even now, which I really appreciate, you're continuing to progress your healing. Being like, what else do I need to work on? What other things do I need to change internally or externally that are going to benefit my healing overall?
Mhm.
And so, for yourself, I'm curious because you did the journaling, you did the emotional work, which that's hard work. Anyone who does that on a daily basis, that is really hard work to dive into, and there can be a lot of resistance. So that's amazing. You engaged in some of the Cole Sacks's program around that. But
Right.
what are some? I'm wondering, like, even after the symptoms had kind of faded and were no longer chronic, like, what are some things, just to give the audience an idea, like, what are some things that were pivotal things that you started to change? Whether it was internally or externally, if you don't mind me asking, like, what were some pivotal things that you changed that really helped progress your healing?
Yeah, a really big thing is just how I was approaching life, and not approaching life through this lens of fear. And it's so insidious because you're not really aware that you're living life through a lens of fear. It's we're always a lot of these fear thoughts are so subconscious, and I think it has a lot to do with my upbringing, being gay and being closeted and having this propensity for having fear-based thinking, right? Because as a child, your child brain evolves, and if you're afraid of, being seen as a certain way,
Yeah,
effectively, I could have lost my attachment. And I know now, like my parents love me and people love me. I can be out and not worry. But as a
yeah,
child, like that, I could have been abandoned. Like that is kind of where your thoughts go. So I had
yeah,
this propensity for um, being in a state of hypervigilance or having fear around everything in my life, because my brain was so used to that. It just kind of kept going back to what was familiar.
yeah,
A lot of toxic shame, a lot of personality traits that I had to work on, things like perfectionism, goodism, people pleasing. Those were all coping mechanisms that I had as a child, to keep myself safe. And now, as an adult, those were the things that were maladaptive coping mechanisms that were keeping me stuck in the pain cycle, the pain fear cycle, really. And so I was viewing my whole life through a lens of danger, needing things to be a certain way, needing things to be perfect. And that created that brain on high alert. And, and nothing's perfect, and my brain can still go there. It can still
yeah,
realize, I might not realize it at the time, but if a symptom comes up, I might say, oh, okay, well, maybe I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself right now, or maybe my brain is being hyper vigilant and going into problem solving mode, and or maybe I need to focus on, reducing some of this mental pressure, or maybe there's an emotion I'm not in touch with. There's so
yeah,
many different internal pressures that we can um, try to understand. And so I realized that it wasn't all about, Dr. Sarno and repressed emotions. It's, I wasn't just going to journal for the rest of my life and get better. There was other things
yeah,
to work on. There were other aspects and sort of non-pain threats that I needed to discover. Yeah.
yeah. And that's amazing. Like, just the amount of work that you've done, and that term that you said, like that lens of danger, that Alan
Mhm.
Gordon always talks about. Like, I think it's something that people really need to investigate, like, throughout their day, like, with every activity. Like, is this being viewed and engaged in through this lens of danger, or is it through a lens of safety?
Yeah.
Because you could do the exact same thing, but it's going to have a completely different response in your nervous system depending on where you're engaging from. And
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Totally. You could tell I have a funny thought.
Yeah.
Even something as simple, I can use an example of like standing in line at the grocery store. And if this is how my brain would be, and putting my brain in high alert, this high stakes energy, thinking, okay, well, I could go in that line over there and it's not going to take as long, but I'm standing in this line right now. But, I want to be through the checkout faster. So
Yeah.
putting all this
Yeah.
pressure on yourself and then if your line's not going fast enough, then you're putting all this, criticism on yourself. And so worry and pressure and criticism. I know it sounds like a funny example, but that's just an example of living your life through a lens of danger. Nothing's going to happen. You're in the grocery store line, you're not late for anything.
Yeah.
Just relax, enjoy the moment, feel safe in this moment. Maybe this is an opportunity for like tuning into your body and maybe not scrolling on your phone and just, feeling safe with the sensation and of being okay with not being in the fastest line at the grocery store. Like that's not a dangerous thing. There's no inherent danger
Yeah.
in being in a long line at the grocery store. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great example because I think it's so relatable. Everyone's been in that zone. As you were talking, I always think about, and I'm better now. I really work at this, but it's similar. Like where they have drive-throughs. Like we're in Canada, so I'm thinking Tim Hortons. They have
Yeah.
drive-throughs where there's two lines, and then they converge after. It was the same thing. I used to be like, okay, like, and I almost get into this fight mode in my mind of like, am I going to get ahead of this person? Like, how's this going to work? And
Yeah.
it's all those little moments that cause like chronic dysregulation in your system. It's all
Mhm.
those little moments that seem so normal to us. We probably don't think about it day to day as we're doing it,
Right.
but it matters. It matters for long term healing because, like, the pressure that can come out of it, as you said, or the self criticism, or you worrying or fighting against things as you're going about these moments in your day where we can actually practice like being in our body, as you said,
Right.
like actually practice being with our internal
Mhm.
state and letting that guide us instead of this chronic survival response taking place in every moment.
Yeah. Or even leading into something like a positive feeling, just tuning into your breath when you realize that your thoughts are going down that road of I need to get through this line really fast. Let's just try to enjoy any sensation that feels either even neutral, like, oh, okay, I feel a little bit of a breeze, or, I can tune into my breath. And that's going to regulate the nervous system too and get your brain to start rehearsing safety. And those safety neural circuits is what we want to be doing. We're working with the brain here. So it's not just about ignoring pain. We're not never ignoring pain. We're like really trying to find this sense of safety in any way we can, and noticing those times that we're being in danger mode, our brain's going there, and it goes there very easily and
Oh
subconsciously.
yeah.
We're not even aware that we're
Snap.
doing it. Oh, yeah, instantly, right?
Yeah, and I think that's it. I talk about with people a lot, like working towards a sense of embodied safety, like actually embodying kind of safety and connection. And
Mm.
part of that isn't just dealing with all the hard stuff, the pain, the emotion, the dysregulation. It's not just that. It's learning of like, how can I be in the present with something that feels neutral or pleasant? And it sounds really simplistic, I think, to people when they hear that. But
Yeah.
like actually going throughout your day and like really savoring those moments can go a really long way as you're
Yeah.
kind of discussing. And so,
Totally.
like, I always watch the analytics on my videos on YouTube, right?
Mhm.
Anytime I post anything about like savoring or leaning into nice sensations, like no one watches that video. Like they
No
just,
way. Oh
yeah, I know.
no.
It's interesting to know because we all want to do the really hard work. Like we can dive into that, but we're forgetting that we're actually working towards this place of embodied safety. That's what we're
Yeah.
going towards as we're discussing. And if you
Yeah.
don't spend time focusing on that in the present, in the here and now, it's really hard for your system to ever become regulated, to become
Yeah.
at ease and calm. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, we really want this positive affect and to be viewing our lives through this lens of safety like that too. Yeah, that was such a missing piece for me too. You know, I had a lot of setbacks along the way, and simple things like that, just leaning into something that feels more pleasurable was something that I wasn't doing. And it doesn't have to be rocket science. You don't have to like take a roller coaster ride or anything like that. You can just, have a moment of mindfulness with a hot tea and just like feel the warmth of the mug and lean into that and those nice sensations. And just those short like bursts of time, that's enough to start working with the neuroplasticity of the brain. We don't need to like constantly be feeling pleasurable sensations or obsess about that either,
Of
but
course.
just practicing moments of the day, just little moments of pleasure, whatever that may be, of savoring something that feels a little nice. You can be, have a connection with an animal, pet the
Yeah.
animal, and we're slowly changing the brain with these things.
Yeah. And that's it. You are changing your brain. All those little moments, they add up. That was really
Right.
well said because they do add up. They may not feel like it in the moment, but all those
Yes.
little moments throughout your day, throughout your week, we are retraining the brain. We are retraining the brain towards safety and connection. That's what we're going for. And by doing that, you're retraining your brain out of chronic pain and symptoms.
Yeah.
So
And you may not notice that the pain, it hasn't gone away right away. So don't think that, I'm petting my animal, it's not working. Like, no, no, no.
yeah,
Like, gotta keep training the brain. And oftentimes the symptoms are the last thing to leave. Once your brain and nervous system reach that place of safety, that is when those danger neural circuits will start to reduce. But so we're just practicing safety as much as we can in order to get that homeostasis.
exactly.
Mhm.
So one thing I want to ask Scotty at the end here is just for you to maybe tell the audience a bit about your practice. Um, what are the main things you focus on when you're working with people? I know that can be a wide array, but tell me a
Mhm.
bit about your practice and what that looks like.
Yeah. Well, so now as this work has evolved for me, working professionally with clients, I do a lot of pain reprocessing therapy. And so this is the work of Alan Gordon and Dr. Howard Schubiner, both of whom I've trained with. And so we do two things. We work at viewing sensations through this lens of safety and reappraising them as safe. And we can do this through somatic tracking. And we would do this on a Zoom call. So, I work with clients virtually anywhere in the world. And so PRT, pain reprocessing therapy, really training the brain to understand that these sensations are safe. And we can work on teaching the brain this through somatic exercises. And then, the other part of it is sort of what we were talking about changing how we view these non-pain threats in our lives, and worry, criticism, and pressures, and we can get into emotions and emotional awareness expression therapy that Dr. Howard Schubiner talks about as well. And
Yeah,
so, yeah, it can be quite broad because there's so many great things we can do, and it may depend on the client as well. Some clients may not feel like they relate to the idea of anxiety, but they're just more annoyed with the symptom. Like they don't relate to this idea of having fear. I know I did. I was very aware of the pain fear cycle. Like the more fear I had, the more pain I had, the more anxiety, and it was like this cycle. But some people they don't relate to that, but they may
yeah,
want to see things through a different angle in order to address the pain, not necessarily from fear, but maybe they're frustrated, or maybe they have a lot of repressed anger or other things they need to look at. So it depends on the client, but we definitely want to be first addressing the symptoms through this lens of safety, and then secondly, viewing our world, our thoughts, beliefs, emotions, all of these things through a lens of safety as well.
yeah. And that's great. You're using, similar to myself, two of those really big models that
Mm.
have been shown to reduce people's symptoms. For some people, bring elimination of symptoms. And you're right. It's not a one size fit all either. I'm
Mhm.
always clear with people as I'm talking on YouTube that you know I'm explaining general things, but it really does work differently person to person. Different people need certain things more than others, and I think that's the great aspect of working with a practitioner is it's individualized. Everything's kind of shifted depending on where a person's at. I've
Yeah.
had people where, some simple somatic tracking and just reducing anxiety and they're good to go. I've had that happen. I have other people
Yeah.
where there's more trauma work or more intense emotions that need to be focused on to kind of get that recovery. And I think it really can take some exploring. I know today we've talked about lots of different areas, but it can take some exploring to figure out, what's going to work for me. What's the best thing for my nervous system to kind of heal my chronic pain or symptoms.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I guess like the common denominator between all of that, regardless of the tool, is the nervous system. And
Yes.
we can look at polyvagal theory and really what is happening with the brain and nervous system from a scientific lens, and get into all of that as well, and really just find this regulation in the nervous system in order to change these neural pathways, because it's coming from the brain. These are neural circuits causing real physiological responses in the body. Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. The brain and nervous system, they're the common denominator. And everyone's brain and nervous system is different. So it can take some
True.
exploring, and it sounds like you're doing amazing work. I love that you're including polyvagal stuff into the mix, as you probably know. Like I enjoy the polyvagal stuff. I think it's a great addition, a great lens on all this mind body work as we're supporting people.
Totally. Yeah. It's super
Mm.
fascinating stuff, right?
Yeah, it's helpful, and even just learning about it, even just learning about the nervous system can be so helpful for some people. So Scotty, I
Hmm.
really appreciate you coming on and talking with me today and sharing a bit about your personal journey and what you've gone through and the amazing healing you've seen for yourself, but also how you're doing that with the clients you work with too. So, for anyone listening, I'll include Scotty's information in the description below if you are enticed to reach out to them. And I thank you again so much for coming on. And
Thank
for everyone
you.
listening, thank you so much. And I will talk to you next week.